Wake up. They are using you. Stop letting people take advantage of your time, energy, and emotions. It's time to break the chains of manipulation. We live in a world where people will use you if you let them. It's time to stop being passive and start being proactive. You have worth, and you have a voice. Don't let anyone take that away from you. It's easy to get trapped in the cycles of emotional manipulation, where you feel obligated to others, sacrificing your own well-being. You might think it's kindness or responsibility or loyalty, but if you're giving more than you're getting in return, you're being used. When you begin to wake up to this reality, you'll realize that there are signs, clear, unmistakable signs that you're being manipulated. Here are 7 indicators that you might be caught in an emotionally manipulative situation. Withholding or silent treatment. The silent treatment or withholding affection is a form of emotional manipulation that can be incredibly harmful, even though it may not always appear overtly abusive. It's a passive-aggressive way for someone to punish you without saying a word, using silence as a tool to control the situation and your emotions. Instead of addressing an issue directly or having an open conversation, the manipulator withdraws communication and affection, leaving you feeling abandoned, isolated, and unsure of how to resolve things. The key element of this tactic is the power dynamic it creates. The person withholding communication knows that their silence is a form of control. They know it will make you feel uncomfortable, unsettled, and desperate to fix the situation. You may feel compelled to reach out, apologize, or do whatever it takes to break the silence and restore the relationship. The manipulator, however, may enjoy the feeling of power that comes from knowing they can make you chase after them. It's a way for them to assert dominance, subtly demanding that you prove your worth or care before they will give you attention or affection again. This form of manipulation is particularly dangerous because it can leave you questioning your own actions. You may start to wonder if you did something wrong or if your behavior was out of line. The manipulator doesn't have to say anything for you to feel guilty or to feel like you're at fault. They might act as though everything is fine until they decide to suddenly withdraw, making you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, unsure of what might trigger the next emotional shutdown. Over time, this dynamic can create an unhealthy emotional dependency where you are constantly trying to appease the person who is emotional withholding, and never quite knowing when things will turn back to normal or what you're doing to provoke the silence. In some cases, the silent treatment may even escalate, lasting for days, weeks, or longer, leaving you in a perpetual state of anxiety. As you try to break the silence, you might be met with coldness, vague responses, or even an outright refusal to communicate. The manipulator may frame their silence as a response to your behavior, implying that you are the one who needs to change or apologize before they will engage with you. This creates a toxic cycle where you feel increasingly responsible for their moods and actions, even though they are the ones choosing to shut you out. The emotional toll of being subjected to the silent treatment can be profound. It can lead to feelings of confusion, frustration, and powerlessness. In severe cases, it can chip away at your self-esteem, making you question whether you are lovable or worthy of respect. Recognizing this behavior for what it is, manipulation, is the first step toward breaking free from it. Setting clear boundaries, refusing to chase after someone who is emotionally punishing you, and fostering open, honest communication can help you reclaim control and protect your emotional well-being. Conditional love or approval. Conditional love or approval is a powerful form of emotional manipulation that can distort a person's sense of self-worth and lead to a toxic, unbalanced relationship dynamic. In this scenario, love, affection, or approval is only given when certain conditions are met, often ones that are unreasonable or serve the manipulator's interests. It creates a situation where you feel like you have to earn love or approval by meeting the other person's expectations, and if you fall short, the affection and validation you crave are withheld. The manipulator may use conditional love as a tool to control your behavior, They might say things like, "I love you if you do this for me," or "I'll be proud of you when you finally achieve this goal." The underlying message is clear. Your worth, your value, or your happiness is contingent on meeting their standards or fulfilling their needs. This creates an emotional roller coaster because when you meet their expectations, you experience fleeting moments of approval or affection. But those moments never feel secure. You begin to feel like you are constantly performing for their validation, constantly striving to do things just right, always worried about falling short. This pattern can lead to a deep sense of insecurity as you begin to internalize the belief that you are only lovable when you're doing things for others or when you're meeting someone else's needs. You might start to neglect your own desires, dreams, and well-being, focusing instead on what will gain you approval or affection from the manipulator. You might also feel like you're walking on eggshells, constantly anxious about doing something wrong or failing to live up to their standards. What makes conditional love particularly damaging is how it prevents authentic emotional connection. True love and healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, understanding, and care, not on meeting a set of conditions. When love is given conditionally, it prevents you from feeling truly accepted for who you are. It fosters a cycle of seeking validation from someone who may never fully offer it, or who constantly sets the bar higher, making it impossible for you to ever feel enough. This form of manipulation can be emotionally exhausting, leading to feelings of inadequacy, shame, and a loss of self-identity. Over time, you may begin to lose sight of who you are outside of the expectations imposed on you. Recognizing when someone is offering love or approval with strings attached is crucial for protecting your self-esteem and establishing healthier relationships. Love should never feel like something you need to work tirelessly to earn. It should be something given freely, based on who you are, not on what you do to satisfy someone else's needs. Overwhelming charm to mask manipulation. Overwhelming charm is one of the most deceptive tactics in emotional manipulation. At first, it can be hard to recognize because the person using this method appears incredibly charismatic, warm, and engaging. They might shower you with attention, compliments, and affection, making you feel like you're the most important person in the room. Their charm feels genuine, and their ability to make you feel special can be intoxicating. But beneath this mask of charm lies a hidden agenda, one that's about using you to get something they want. The manipulator may overwhelm you with attention, almost to the point where it feels too good to be true. They may lavish you with praise, create an aura of admiration around you, or go out of their way to make you feel validated in ways that feel rare or extraordinary. This excessive charm is designed to draw you in and lower your defenses. When someone's charm feels too perfect, when they seem to know exactly what to say at just the right time, it's often a calculated move. They want to create an emotional bond quickly, making you feel indebted to them, or like you owe them something in return for their affection. Once you're hooked, that charm can be used to manipulate your emotions. The manipulator may ask for favors, make demands, or push you into doing things you wouldn't normally do, all while maintaining their sweet, flattering demeanor. You might find yourself saying yes to things you wouldn't otherwise agree to, simply because you don't want to disappoint someone who's been so overwhelmingly kind and charming. The manipulator uses their charm as a tool to influence your behavior without you even realizing it. The problem is that this charm is rarely unconditional. It's a means to an end. They don't care about you for who you are. They care about what they can get from you. In some cases, if you start to resist or set boundaries, the manipulator will flip their charm into something else, perhaps a subtle guilt trip or a shift into anger or coldness. Their overwhelming charm, which was once meant to win you over, becomes a weapon that can quickly turn the relationship dynamic on its head. This emotional whiplash is confusing as you try to reconcile the loving, generous person with someone who is now acting distant, demanding, or critical. Over time, the charm fades and you may begin to realize that the affection or attention you received was never truly about you. It was about controlling you. Recognizing this pattern early on is crucial. Charm should never be used as a means of manipulation. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect and authentic connection, not on using excessive charm to get what you want. Constant guilt trips. You've probably experienced it, being made to feel guilty, even when you've done nothing wrong. Constant guilt trips are one of the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation, and they can affect your mental health, your sense of self-worth, and your relationships. What starts as a subtle hint here and that can slowly chip away at your boundaries, leading you to question your own actions and decisions, all in the name of appeasing someone else's emotional demands. At the core of guilt tripping is control. The person who uses guilt as a weapon wants to shape your behavior and force you to act according to their wishes, regardless of your own needs or desires. They may say things like, "I can't believe you would do this to me," or "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me." The insinuation is clear. If you don't do what they want, you're selfish, ungrateful, or unloving. They will often make it seem like their pain or disappointment is a direct result of your actions, which isn't just unfair, it's also a distortion of reality. One of the hallmarks of a guilt trip is the way it makes you feel as though you've hurt someone, even when you've done nothing to harm them. The manipulator will twist situations and conversations to position themselves as the victim, making it look like you've made a mistake, even if that's not the case. It's emotionally exhausting because no matter what you do, it's never quite enough. You'll find yourself apologizing for things you shouldn't have to apologize for, or even feeling responsible for someone else's mood, behavior, or well-being. This constant sense of responsibility can become overwhelming. You may start to feel as if you're always walking on eggshells, trying to avoid conflict or disapproval. The manipulator knows exactly how to use your own empathy and sense of guilt against you. It might not be immediate. At first, the guilt trips are subtle, maybe disguised as casual comments. Over time, they build into a pattern of behavior that leaves you feeling trapped. You want to avoid conflict, so you keep trying harder and harder to make the person happy, often to the detriment of your own mental and emotional health. What makes guilt tripping so dangerous is that it can create a false sense of obligation. The manipulator will convince you that you owe them something that, in reality, you don't owe at all. Whether it's their time, their energy, their support, or their love, they'll make it seem like your actions or decisions are a direct betrayal of that debt. You might feel like you're constantly in a position of having to make up for something you never did wrong in the first place, or that you're perpetually in someone's emotional debt. This can also be incredibly confusing because you start to question your own motivations. Are you being selfish? Are you really the one in the wrong? Guilt trips can cause you to second-guess yourself, even to the point where you feel like you can't trust your own emotions or decisions. Over time, you become more attuned to the emotional needs of others, but less in touch with your own. You begin to prioritize their feelings over yours, trying to avoid making them feel bad at all costs. You start to mold yourself into what you think they want, even if that means sacrificing your own desires, your own values, and ultimately, your own identity. It's a subtle erosion of your autonomy. The longer you stay in a situation where you're constantly guilt-tripped, the more it affects your sense of self. Your ability to say no diminishes and your boundaries become weaker and weaker. You find yourself giving up more and more of yourself to accommodate the manipulator, whether it's your time, your energy, or your emotional reserves. Eventually, you may even start to resent them, though you'll never feel like you can fully express that resentment, because the guilt will always be looming over you, making you feel like you're in the wrong for feeling anything but compassion. And here's the thing, guilt tripping isn't just about getting what the manipulator wants in the moment, it's a long-term strategy. Over time, it molds your behavior, making you easier to control. You might begin to see yourself as the bad guy for asserting yourself, for setting boundaries, for not always doing what others want. You feel guilty when you take time for yourself, when you say no, when you stand up for what you need. This cycle reinforces the idea that you are, in fact, responsible for everyone else's feelings and well-being, and that your needs don't matter as much as theirs. So how do you break free? First, recognize the pattern. When you start to feel guilty for something you haven't done wrong, pause and reflect. Are you truly in the wrong, or is someone trying to manipulate your emotions? Challenge the notion that you owe someone something they haven't earned. Set boundaries, even if it's uncomfortable. Remind yourself that your feelings are valid and that it's okay to say no without feeling guilty. The more you become aware of this manipulation, the easier it becomes to resist. You have the right to live your life for you, not to fulfill someone else's emotional needs at the expense of your own. Don't let the constant guilt trips continue to shape your reality. Recognize your worth, stand up for yourself, and stop letting others use your empathy and kindness as leverage to control you. Playing the victim. There's a manipulation tactic that's often subtle but deeply effective: playing the victim. It's a strategy designed to garner sympathy, manipulate emotions, and ultimately get what someone wants without taking responsibility for their own actions. The manipulator uses their perceived suffering to draw you in, make you feel guilty, and shift the focus away from their behavior. You'll start to feel like you're the one who should be comforting them, solving their problems, and making sure they're okay, all while they continue to avoid taking any accountability for their own choices or emotions. At first, it can be difficult to recognize, because the victim can appear to be someone who is genuinely in need, someone who is going through a hard time. The manipulation is disguised as vulnerability, a plea for help, or an expression of distress. But this tactic isn't about real need. It's about controlling the narrative and putting you in a position where you feel obligated to respond to their emotional crisis. When someone plays the victim, they subtly position themselves as helpless and unable to do anything about their situation, even when they have the power to change things themselves. The victim mindset is one where the individual refuses to take responsibility for their own actions, focusing instead on how the world or others have wronged them. Everything that goes wrong in their life is someone else's fault, and they never stop reminding you of it. They'll talk about how life is always unfair to them, how people don't understand them, how things never go their way. They'll list every injustice they've suffered, often exaggerating or manipulating the facts to ensure that you see them as a martyr. Over time, it feels like you're constantly hearing about their struggles, their misfortunes, and their inability to move forward. What makes this tactic so effective is how it shifts the emotional burden onto you. You start to feel sorry for them, thinking that if you just offer the right support, they'll finally feel better and things will improve. But that's the catch. No matter how much you give, it's never enough. The victim's suffering never seems to resolve. Even if they're given the help or attention they claim to need, it's short-lived. They'll come back with a new story, a new set of problems, or a new complaint, always positioning themselves as the one who is being wronged. They may even actively seek out situations where they can continue playing the victim, refusing to take control or action in their own life. Over time, you may start to feel a sense of responsibility for their emotional well-being. You feel like it's up to you to help them, to fix things, to make their life better. They may guilt trip you into thinking that if you don't come through for them, you're a bad person, or that they'll fall apart without you. But here's the reality: playing the victim is an avoidance tactic. It's a way for them to shirk personal responsibility and put the burden on others. They don't want to address the things in their life that they can change. They want to avoid confronting their own role in their situation and instead cast blame elsewhere. This creates a power imbalance in your relationship. You end up investing emotional energy into a person who isn't willing to do the hard work of improving their own life or behavior. You might find yourself constantly offering advice, support, or reassurance, but it's like you're filling a bottomless pit. They never actually take your advice or make any lasting changes because that's not what they want. They want the comfort of your sympathy, the validation of their victimhood, and the emotional payoff of getting attention without having to take action. In relationships like this, it's easy to feel like the manipulator is helpless, and you may start to doubt your own instincts. You'll wonder if you're being too harsh for wanting them to take responsibility for their actions. But in truth, playing the victim is not about genuine need, it's about emotional manipulation. It's about keeping you in a position of caretaker, where you are emotionally invested in their problems, but never truly getting the kind of emotional support or acknowledgement you need in return. You may even feel guilty for wanting to pull back, for not being able to solve their problems, or for not giving them the emotional energy they demand. But the truth is, you can't solve someone else's problems if they aren't willing to help themselves. If you're constantly giving without receiving anything in return, it creates an unhealthy dynamic that leaves you drained, frustrated, and resentful. What's worse is that when you do push back or start setting boundaries, they'll often escalate their victimhood even further, portraying you as cold, uncaring, or selfish. The manipulator may twist your desire for personal space or time into something that makes you look like the villain in the story, reinforcing their narrative of being the one who is constantly wronged. It's a toxic cycle that becomes harder and harder to escape. Recognizing when someone is playing the victim is essential for protecting your emotional health. It requires recognizing that you are not responsible for other people's feelings, and that it is not your job to constantly carry the weight of their emotional burdens. Setting boundaries and refusing to accept the role of emotional caretaker is crucial. Encourage personal responsibility in the people around you, and remember that real support involves two-way communication and mutual respect, not manipulation and guilt. If someone is unwilling to take responsibility for their own life and emotions, it's okay to step back and stop allowing yourself to be emotionally manipulated. Shifting the blame. Shifting the blame is one of the most frustrating and damaging tactics used by emotional manipulators. It works by taking a situation where someone has clearly made a mistake or acted inappropriately, and instead of taking responsibility, they deflect all accountability onto others. It's a powerful tool because it puts you in a position where you feel guilty or responsible for something that's not your fault, making you question your actions or feel like you have to apologize even when you've done nothing wrong. What makes blame shifting particularly dangerous is how subtle and insidious it can be. Initially, it might seem like a minor deflection, but over time it becomes a repeated behavior. The manipulator might start by saying things like, "If you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have reacted that way, or I wouldn't have yelled if you didn't make me feel so frustrated." The goal is to turn the tables and make you feel responsible for their emotions, behaviors, and even their failures. Instead of confronting their own issues, they put the burden on you, forcing you to either accept the blame or to feel guilty for something you didn't do. As this pattern continues, it can begin to erode your confidence and self-trust. So you start to doubt your own perception of events. Were you too harsh? Did you really cause the situation to escalate? This self-doubt is precisely what the manipulator wants. It keeps you off balance and makes you easier to control. You might even begin to apologize for things that weren't your fault, simply because the manipulator has effectively made you believe that you are somehow responsible for their reactions. This can lead to a toxic dynamic in relationships, where one person is perpetually taking on more than their fair share of responsibility. Meanwhile, the manipulator avoids taking any accountability for their actions, which means they never have to change or grow. They get to maintain the status quo, while you end up bearing the emotional weight of situations that should have been shared or resolved together. Recognizing when someone is shifting the blame is crucial for your own well-being. Once you identify this pattern, it's important to stand firm in your understanding of the situation set boundaries, and refuse to accept responsibility for things that aren't yours to own. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most damaging forms of emotional manipulation, and it works by distorting your perception of reality to make you question your own memory, thoughts, or sanity. The term comes from a 1938 play called Gaslight, in which a husband slowly manipulates his wife into doubting her own sense of reality by dimming the gas lights and then denying that they've changed, making her think she's losing her mind. In modern-day situations, gaslighting can be much more subtle but just as harmful. A gaslighter will often use tactics such as denying facts, events, or conversations that you know took place. They might tell you things like, "That never happened," or "You're just being paranoid," even when you have clear evidence to the contrary. The goal is to make you feel confused and unsure of what you know to be true. Over time, this erodes your confidence in your own judgment and makes you more reliant on a manipulator for validation. Gaslighting isn't always about outright lying. It's often about small, seemingly insignificant distortions of the truth that add up over time. They may dismiss your concerns as overreacting or sensitive, even when your feelings are completely valid. They might twist your words or misinterpret your intentions, then accuse you of saying or doing things you never did. By doing so, they aim to invalidate your reality and make you doubt your own experiences.